This is the Shadow Chronicles podcast. We are here to take a deep dive into the inner work, generational trauma, and your shadows. Having those hard conversations so you don't have to. You know, all of that shit that just does not get spoken about. In the third drawer down, in the dark, hidden away. My name is Sky and I'm a shadow integration specialist. I am here to help guide you on your journey to unfuck yourself by integrating your shadows, healing the generational trauma so you can vibrate with confidence and just fucking love your life.
And my name is Todd, who's an integrative health coach. I help people own more of who they are, change their lives on many different levels to become who they really are. Find your compass and follow it, to say it simply.
And welcome back. So this is going to be like part 2 / separate episode from from last week when we took a dive into the ego dissolution, the dark night of the soul, and like shadow work and how that all correlates and
slaps together.
Yeah, because, you know, that's what it does.
Very technical term.
Slap. Right. Yep, that's it. I feel like it's probably a good idea to put a little caveat on this because I know this kind of can get a little bit like offendy.
Did you just say caviar?
Caveat, whatever.
No, they both work.
Yay. Cool. Because you just looked at me like...
double checking because...
She just said something wrong.
Could slather some caviar so it's a little bit more fancy and more palatable. Or we could put the caveat on it so it's a little bit pre-qualified so that we're not offending people just straight out the gate.
Yeah, that. So,
like I say, they both work.
Yeah. Oh, are you just looking at me because I use the fancy word, not the like...
No. There's no vocabulary shaming here. Why are you taking this personally, Sky? Why? But just, if you meant caviar, it was still awesome. Yeah,
that. Because we're going to touch on a bit of a touchy subject, and I would like to pre-frame that to sort of have a look at it from all angles, and whatever we're about to say is not anything to devalidate anybody going through anything, but looking at it from a bit more of like how society is and spiritual and like with the shadow and all that sort of stuff, how these things come up. Is that enough pre-framing? Do you want to like add anything in there?
Yes, I do. But I'm deciding how I want to say it so it doesn't just sound like I'm gaslighting people into letting me victim blame before I've even said the thing. Sorry, before we've even said the thing.
Yep.
I think we've talked briefly in other episodes from last season about identifying as the condition.
Yeah.
As opposed to acknowledging that you have a condition.
Yes.
And the distinction between the two having a huge impact on how much it impacts your life and how you live it and how you feel about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest early on that if us saying something about identifying as the condition as opposed to acknowledging that you experience something that is called a condition.
Yeah.
And has a noticeable triggering effect, that maybe that's because that's something to dig into.
Or you could completely ignore the episode, one or the other. Like,
have I been nice enough but victim blaming enough there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, cool.
All right. So, like, this is a topic that actually really fascinates me. As someone that has suffered with mental health conditions within the system, someone that is, you know, like the piece of paper says that I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD. But not only that, like, you know, my grandma was bipolar. My mum is diagnosed as clinically depressed, and and my little brother has what they would call anger issues and all of this sort of stuff. So when I sort of really myself started digging into it, I was like, okay, well, what does this actually mean? Because this is something that's becoming more and more apparent, and there is that negative film on it of like, just get over it, or, everyone's a little ADHD, just, try harder, or whatever the case may be. But no one's actually really looked into, or no one really talks about that, I feel, the social conditioning that has happened that has created this. If you like disown and disconnect certain parts of yourself and then try and fit yourself into a box and then fit yourself into a society where you actually, I believe that like no one's really no one fits into society. It's like this unattainable thing that in order to fit into it and operate in it, you literally have to fucking disown so many parts of yourself. You end up with depression or, with anxiety or, any of those things, because you're operating from such a space of stress and such a space of, the nervous system being in flight and fight. And it's, if we look at it from that, holistic, spiritual, whatever fucking label you want to put on it, no fucking wonder why.
Feeling at odds with yourself, let alone at odds with the people around you and the rules that seem to exist to make that palatable.
Yeah.
Is its own huge fucking problem in and of itself.
Right.
Let alone the condition that you've been labelled with one way or the other. The reason I prefaced this conversation the way I did, was because I wanted to make a distinction between, and if I'm being honest, this whole episode is about to make a distinction between a genuine condition that you as an individual who may or may not be diagnosed with a condition has the capacity to manage, as opposed to pretend like it's not there to fit in, to make people who just don't understand more comfortable.
Yeah, that's it. And even still almost on the space of, and this is going to be a little bit jabby, as we've spoken about in previous episodes, when, people are exhibiting, unhealthy behaviours or traits or whatever else, and it's been, the excuse is being met with like, oh, that's just how I grew up, you just have to deal with it, or that's just the way I am, you just have to deal with it. And not to say that that is, something that we say with people that have been, sort of diagnosed, but at the same time, if you're using it as a weapon in order to be a shitty person,
weaponized incompetence in its way.
Yeah.
But yes, but go in the other direction almost.
It's, becomes like, well, then it becomes your identity because you've identified with it. So therefore it becomes all that you are and all that you are. And you then, as I've said multiple times and as Todd said multiple times, where focus goes, energy flows. So instead of being, oh, well, I have this thing, then that means I can't do this, 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 and this. Reframing that and being like, well, I have this thing. How can I do this, this, and this in a way that works for me?
I don't know how many episodes ago it was, but we were talking about your ADHD diagnosis.
Yep.
And you were talking about the process and the hoops you had to jump through. And once you told your story, I hope the question that I asked was, do you feel like you needed the piece of paper? And this conversation we're having right now is why.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, there is value in being able to put a finger on, oh, that's why I'm weird.
Yeah, makes sense. I get it now. Yeah.
So at least there's some information to work from.
Yep.
As opposed to, and this is, kind of, I think, why this is a conversation that we both wanted to have, maybe from different directions, as opposed to a prison and a limitation, and kind of like what you said before, it's like that expectation to live up to a thing or not live up to a thing, and then make that other people's problems or exclusively your problems, sort of thing. Sort of what you were saying before about this is just how I am, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, what if you do that to yourself, courtesy of said label?
Yep.
It's like,
well, you'll do it to yourself always before you do it to other people. And I think we were just having a chat about this before we press record, how like everything comes back to self, whether that's self-worth or whatever else. You know, so you 9 times out of 10, you will internalize before you externalize. You know, you will make up all the things of how much you're, and I say this in quotation marks, like you're this, you're that, you're a shitty person, you can't do this, like no one will love you, whatever fucking story you're telling yourself, that will, go internally, and then it will come out externally by behaviors and, the people that you bring into your life.
Compliant, defiant, resonant behaviors, like all of those things.
Yeah.
Like it just depends on how you choose to respond, choose to react as opposed to respond to that internalization. But that's kind of why this is ultimately an important conversation to have with yourself. If you think you're broken because someone said you've got a thing, that's how you make yourself broken.
I was going to say that means you're broken then.
You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You need to learn how to integrate yourself with yourself first and foremost, and your own experiences of yourself. And then by extension, the world at large. And being able to own that. The reason I brought up like your diagnosis with ADHD,
that's all right,
is because like if you needed the piece of paper, that to my mind would be someone who needed the excuse to be limited.
So
not in
and like. Well, it depends, right? So I'm going to
when I say needed, I mean you needed it, not it's convenient and valuable information.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know. For me, and I like sing this to the rooftops to anyone that will fucking listen. And I'll tell this to everybody. Like, and that is, do not make the same mistake as I made. And that is to wait for that piece of paper before I gave myself the kindness that I deserved to know that, yes, I was different. Yes, I operated differently, which meant that, I can, but I choose not to. I couldn't do things the way other people do it, and that's okay. And I learn differently, and, things that don't interest me, I don't fucking do, and things like that. And like, I know for me, when I was doing it, when I was going through the process, it was I was kind of, I would probably say I was like in a bit of a dark night of the soul, so to speak. I wasn't enjoying life at the time. I wasn't enjoying running my business, and I kept driving my business into the ground, and I just did not know why. And I had a few people come up to me, or I had clients even go like, do you have ADHD or something, just because of the way I was? I was like, I don't know. Not to my knowledge, and that kind of got the cogs turning. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll look into this. And I started researching. I'm like, oh yeah, I do a lot of those things, don't I? I'm like, oh yeah, oh okay, well, and I went down the process of, getting the diagnosis in hopes to be able to open up avenues of support to help me inside my career and inside my business, inside of, all of that, what ways that people like me do it, rather than trying to do, the cookie cutter box standard of this is how you have to do it. Exactly. Like fitting into the box when I never really fit into the box. And,
Fuck the box.
Right,
But-
fuck the box. Like,
But you got to know you can say that
yeah.
to say that,
And
to act accordingly.
yeah, and I very much did wait for that piece of paper to get that little bit of validation to go, I am different. Okay. Wow. This is cool. And I then went on a journey, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this in previous episodes or so before, but my journey kind of didn't go in a traditional route. Wonder why, but I went down the line of energetics. I went down the line of like looking into my human design and actually looking into that chart. And I found it very fascinating and fascinating is a word. And just even like, I guess that other layer of like, no one's actually wired the same. We're all wired completely fucking differently. And when I looked into my chart and the channels that I had and the centers I had defined and non-defined, and if anyone is listening who, knows a little bit about human design, I'm a 3/5 emotional manifester. And one of the key things about a manifester is big energy needs to recover. I initiate, I inform, I'm very loud, and that's just due to the centers I have and the channels that I have. And I went, everything that was like written on this chart, and I only have like scraped the surface because there's so much that you can learn. Everything inside that chart correlated with my ADHD diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, holy fucking shit. Like, hang on a minute here. Like, and then it kind of going, well, why do we have this? Like, why do we have this diagnosis of like ADHD or autism or, whatever else? If you can look into your energetics and learn your energetics from a young age, you learn how to operate. Am I screaming into the microphone or something? No. Just like got your hands over your ears, like squeezing them.
Adjusting headsets.
You can learn how to, if you learn your energetics as well, you can learn who you are on that, core level and why you do the things you do and how other people do the things that they do because they're wired completely differently. And, and that's in itself that level of sort of self-acceptance, self-love, that, again, that another little piece of paper that says, you are different.
I was going to poke at that a little, but anyway.
But that and even parenting and stuff like that, like looking into that's sort of been, again, a massive game changer because, my children operate differently to I do. My husband operates differently to I do. All of those sort of things come in and it's just like, even I think I was talking to my mentor about it as well, and both of my sons, for example, do not have their emotional center defined. So that's part of them's completely open and mine is defined. And even my mentor said, she goes, the amount of people that come through my doors that have emotional disorders, like emotional regulation disorders and all that sort of stuff, I find it very interesting that none of them have their emotional center defined. So they don't have access to the full range of emotions. They absorb them from other people, turn them around and project them back out. So they can become over emotional because they're spitting whatever they've absorbed in back at the person 10 times, or they are completely shut down. And I was like, oh, really? That's super fascinating, because then you go through a process of, and it's not saying people that have undefined emotional centers don't have emotions. They're just, their access to them is completely different. Their ability to process and feel them is different. So I also, coming back then to, ADHD, for example, because I've had people walk through my door because they have seen that I'm neurodivergent and stuff like that. And I don't know whether or not they expect, I don't know what word to use. The only one that's coming to my mind is cushioning or anything like that. But they come to me saying, I can't do this because I have emotional regulation disorder. I lash out, I do this, I do that. And I'm like, that's nice. Cool story, bro. And they look at me like, oh, you have ADHD too. And I said, yeah, I 100% know that because, yeah, I have experienced those things as well. But I not once, have I gone, you know what, I'm going to treat you like a fucking idiot and scream and yell at you because I'm angry. And going, oh, well, that's just because I have emotional regulation disorder. I went on a journey because I knew typical regulation strategies weren't helping. And even before my diagnosis, I was teaching my clients multitude of ways to regulate themselves because I knew that one thing didn't work for all people, and so
it's absurdity to expect that it would.
Well, and I think that's where, like, when we get these labels, diagnosis, whatever, and you're inside the system, that's what they say. They're like, you have this, you have emotional regulation disorder. And I'm like, well, first of all, as a child, were you ever taught to regulate your fucking emotions? No. Well, no wonder why you're dysregulated, because you were never taught to regulate them. Like, hello. But then on the flip side of that, it's like, okay, well, lashing out and being highly emotional is a concept that comes with being ADHD, and whether or not that is because, people on that spectrum, like all spectrums, are forced to comply with societal standards or fit into society norms or anything like that, so when this set of rules or this set of routines to practice regulation doesn't work, they're like, well, you're broken. It's like, well, no, they're not. You just haven't.
You need a pill. Yeah.
You need, find a way that it makes it work for you. Learn when you start to go into those states of, dysregulation, or when that anger starts to really bubble up and you're like, and instead of trying to push through it until you go boom, actually learning how to take that step back and learning how to identify the steps before the thing happened that made you go boom. So you're like, were you overstimulated? Were you overwhelmed? Were you this? Were you that? Okay, cool. Well, I think I said this today, we all have that breaking point where pushed so far, you go snap. And a part of self-regulation, for example, and I'm way in tangent land right now, is being able to notice when you're getting pushed like that, and either A, placing boundaries down and walking away to regulate, 2, learning how to regulate that works for you, and then 3, actually, really communicating, going, look, I'm needing to sort of woo-saw myself for a second here. Can you stop talking? Can you do this? Can you do that? And being able to then process. And once you do that, you regulate yourself, because even in the outburst, and this is the funny thing that I was really taught, I was like, you see these people that have these massive, angry, emotional outbursts, throw chairs across the room, punch holes in the walls, whatever else, and they go, you're dysregulated. They just fucking regulated themselves. Not a very unhealthy way.
I was about to say, admittedly, not a particularly healthy way.
But that in itself is regulation. Screaming in rage is regulation. Crying is regulation.
Processing emotion.
It's moving it, and 9 times out of 10 you're taught to fucking smush it down to the point where you can't smush it anymore, and then blow up and go, wow, what the fuck that happened? There's something wrong with me. And so that was my little tangent. I'm not really sure what the point was there.
If I had to guess, I'd say the point was the descriptive process of your lived experience of what this that we're talking about actually looks like for you. As you were talking, it occurred to me that a relevant question might also be, how many conditions are things that you can learn your way through, as opposed to is literally a biomechanical, biochemical, physiological, neurological thing that is just how shit is?
Yeah. I feel that a lot of them are. You know, there's
I'm going to agree with that.
you know, like when we talk, okay, so, you know, when we talk, for example, about depression, there's so many different levels of it, and you know, and all that sort of stuff, and like then there's clinical depression and all this sort of stuff, and there's, you know, studies and stuff to say that it's hereditary, and all this sort of stuff, and like even still I'd want to be like, that sounds a lot like conditioning, because they say that there's a chemical. Yeah, I know you're like, yum, yum, let me talk.
No.
They say that there's like a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that is 100% correct. There is an imbalance within the brain that causes those things to come about. But there's also now so much study and so much proof that chemical imbalances can be rebalanced.
My only question to that, like you've kind of already answered, is like, yeah, but why is it imbalanced?
And
because there's some things. Right.
Well, look at your environment. Like if you grew up with a parent that was, you know, non-present, dissociated, highly depressed, and all this sort of stuff, and then took all their emotions out on you, whether that be anger and rage, well, you kind of grow up and then you too have that condition, and you're like, well, no fucking wonder why. Like if that's the only experience that you have of life, that is the experience that you're going to follow through until you go, hang on a minute, you know, because like, and even saying that's exactly how I grew up, like, you know, highly volatile and then also quite depressive states. And at the age of 21, I was diagnosed with depression, as well as PTSD and anxiety and a few other, you know, like a little shit sandwich. And
lots of fun letters.
Lots of fun letters, right? But yeah, it's definitely when I went on my healing journey, when I got help, because I was never medicated for these conditions. And whether you choose to take medication or not, that's not right or wrong. But I wanted a different way because I had noticed that I was self-medicating, and I'm like, even in my mind at the age of 21, I saw taking antidepressants and taking illicit drugs to be the same thing. It was like, well, I'm kind of just swapping one thing for another, and that's actually not fixing the problem, and I wanted to fix the problem. You know, so moving through my healing journey and stuff like that, I'm no longer anxious, I'm no longer depressed, I'm no longer all of these things, because of the work that I've done, the environments that I choose to put myself in, and all of those sort of things. So it's in that retrospect, I sort of really believe that, yes, those are some of the things that you can definitely learn your way through. Like, how did I get here? You know, why am I feeling like this? I was actually reflecting today, which was super cool, in the car on the way to the gym, because that's what I do. And I was just remembering a client session that I had done last year, I think it was. And like she was like overwhelmed with sadness, you know, and started to completely isolate herself and all of this sort of stuff. And if she'd gone to the doctors, she would have been diagnosed with depression, with the symptoms that she was, you know, explaining, or the behaviours that she was explaining to me with. And I was like, okay, so we did a bunch of work, but then in a part of that work, I cleared the block of sadness within the body, because she just built up such a what we call like a gestalt, such a spot in her body, where anytime she felt that sadness, that's where it would go. And it would grow and grow and grow until it kind of overtook everything else. And when we cleared that out, I sort of also really learned, and in the same time, is that she had completely disowned and disconnected her happiness. So anytime that she felt that, it was wrong or bad, or, you know, she would push it away, essentially, for whatever reason. So she'd put that into her shadow. And I said to her, well, no fucking wonder why you're having this like overwhelming sadness, because you've gotten rid of the polar opposite of it.
Balance of it.
Yeah, you've gotten rid of the balance, and that balance, so that other thing that you've left had to fill the space. And like when we cleared it through and when we reintegrated and everything like that, she was fine. Like, you know, she integrated, she like was loving life again, back at Pilates, back at work, you know, all the things. And that's kind of where it sort of also got me really thinking about this, because it's like, well, how many people are suffering with depression, for example, that either have rejected their happiness because anytime they were happy, it was taken away from them, or it was, you know, like tall poppy syndrome or this or that or whatever else. So they've disconnected it, and that's all that there's left. And then they're like maybe, you know, using medication to try and remove that sadness, but all it's doing is kind of pushing it down a little bit, numbing it out, and connecting back to yourself and looking into your own self-worth and all of the things that you feel and why and how and, you know, all this sort of stuff, and doing the integration work to bring it all back to rebalance, which essentially then realigns the, you know, chemicals in your brain as one way.
.5% of conditions are considered to be lifestyle in source and origin.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between something that's interpreted as hereditary and something that's frankly learned behavior isn't much.
No.
So whether it's conditioning, because some of it might be inherited biome, which is an inherited thing, but that's still something you can sort of manage and adjust and manipulate.
Mm.
Some of it's the stigma associated with the label that you have or haven't been given by yourself or by someone else.
Mm.
So what you're describing in terms of the last couple of minutes, people use like I am statements.
Yep.
I am anxious. I am depressed. It's that energy flows where attention goes kind of conversation.
Yep.
The only reason I even brought this up about 10 minutes ago was like there will be a distinction. There are some conditions that are conditions.
Yeah.
There are some conditions that are things that can be at least managed.
Yep.
One way or the other. The problem with things like anxiety and depression, as two very specific and very prominent examples, is that the more you identify it as the condition, the more you prime your physiology, neurology, your thoughts, patterns, behaviors
to source that out.
Yeah. To create that self-fulfilling prophecy, to keep that being the case, because on a very real level, and this is why this is a valuable conversation, I sort of touched on it a while ago. If you think that's all you are, if you think that the label supersedes everything else about you that is you, as you were saying, you detach from certain elements that maybe are counterbalancing or counterintuitive to the story, the agenda, the belief that you have about yourself. It's like you're tripling down on that shit.
Yeah.
You've got a label and you've got someone else telling you, and now you're
telling you
invested in it.
Yep.
And to put it mildly, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
You end up with like classical or Pavlovian conditioning elements, sort of things like, oh, I had a bad experience when I left the house once. Now it's not even the bad experience, it's the leaving the house.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you get anxious if that's the association that your neurology's made? Why wouldn't you think you're broken watching everyone else do that, who does experience anxiety, but maybe doesn't identify as anxious, because that is now one of the cornerstones of who you think you are.
Yeah. And I think, I know, like the part of the human experience, because, you know, we're all meat popsicles piloted by a spirit ghost, is the capacity to feel. and the capacity to feel deeply, and the capacity to feel all things. And this is where, like, I guess the shadow aspect comes into it, because, you know, you've got a massive part of society that's like, well, if you're feeling these things, there's something wrong with you. Here is the piece of paper. Here's the label.
Smile, you'll feel better.
You know, have you tried smiling? I don't know, like all of the...
The irony is that does have its place, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. So then, like, as you said, then you've got, you know, a whole, you know, part of the world going, well, you're different and you're feeling this and that's bad. So therefore you have this. And then, as you said, like then the piece of paper that also says this and then this, rather than going, like as I said, well, hang on a minute, why are you feeling like this? What has happened? You know, like, as you said, like environment, lifestyle. What environment did you grow up in? What environment are you currently in? You know, is it a healthy environment? Is it an unhealthy environment? And this is also where I think like things like, you know, work, job, depending on, you know, who you are. A lot of people are working because they have no choice. School is one of them as well.
One of the biggest ones.
One of the biggest. There was an interesting conversation I had with someone about that, which I'll circle back with. Yeah, and it was, so you're in a job because you've got to make money to pay rent or mortgage and live and food and bills and all that sort of stuff.
Hand jobs for crack is not as viable as it sounds.
Right. And so, but the environment is not a healthy environment. And well, no wonder why you're kind of feeling a bit depressed, because you have to do this thing. And in order to do this thing, you have to do this, which is also why I believe that the system has been set up for you to fail. It's set up to keep you in that sadness, or that, you know, this is all I'm worth, or all of those sort of things, because that's kind of how you stay controlled. And that's kind of like, I'm going to stop. That's my conspiracy theory for the day.
It's not conspiracy theory as far as I'm concerned.
You know, but just before I forget, that the schooling being one of the major ones. I had a really fun conversation with somebody last week. And I can't remember if it was in the course that I was helping with or another person, but we're talking about how in schools that, you know, they really try and drive in home to the kids that you got to sit still, you got to be quiet, you got to do this. And they do this for however many hours you are at school, depending on what school you're at. My kids are at school longer because they're at private schooling than, say, public schooling, for example. And I was saying, like, I was really, really loved my eldest teacher, because he was very good at just randomly throughout the day going, all right, come on, guys. And he'll get everyone up, get everyone's water bottle and take them for a run around the quad, or take them to the oval to play for 5 minutes, or get them just to stand up in their chair and do 10 star jumps. And, you know, like, yeah, right. So
star jumps on the chair?
No, like away from the table. I was going to say,
like, this guy's going to get sued.
Yeah, right. But I was just like, I really love that. Because she was like, yeah, because the interesting thing is they sit there and tell these kids to sit down, be quiet and shut up and stay still. And then yet when you know, become an adult, and if you work in an office job, they tell you to stand up and move around. Don't sit down all day. Make sure you stand up and move around. And, you know, if you can, get a sit-stand table and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because I think I was having a conversation because I can't sit still for very long, and I sit there and fidget and I change my legs and all sorts of stuff. And I was just laughing because I was like, I need one of those treadmills.
I've met you before.
That, like, you just lay on, like, under your table and you can just walk on while you work.
It's like restless leg syndrome, but you're getting half steps in.
Yeah, that. But yeah, and I was just like, you know, so yeah, they create an environment where you're constricted. They create an environment where you have to disconnect parts of yourself. Hello, shadow. And then you go and you grow up and you go into the workforce where they do the same thing, and you've never been taught how to actually connect back to those parts that you had to disconnect from, because I know in previous episodes we've talked about towing the line, and, you know, yes, there are rules that, you know, we need to follow and all of that sort of stuff. But if you're never taught to then A, regulate, or B, connect back into those parts, you know, and allow them to come out when they are allowed to come out, then they get stuck in the shadow. And if you're all that you're left with is like this watered down version of you that's filled with dread and sadness and anxiety because you're filled with pent up energy and all this sort of stuff, and you can't actually do anything with it because the minute you do, it's deemed as bad or wrong, then, well, fucking no wonder why. And I'm like, you're pointing at me. I'm like, okay, I'll shut up now.
No, it's not that. It's like, I'm glad you brought it back to that. Do you think, especially when it comes to mental health and whatever delineation we want to make of that, that rejection sensitivity is causal or symptomatic, or both?
Oh, that's a fantastic question.
Now, I ask that because everything you've just described would be symptomatic.
Yes.
In that the constant rubbing, yep, that'll do, of how society appears to want you to work against what makes sense to you as a little kid who experiences this or experiences that.
Yeah.
Even if no one's overtly and categorically said, sit down and stop being weird, would be continually drawing comparisons to you being different.
Yes.
And why wouldn't you be sensitive to rejection just on an inherent internal level, regardless of whether anyone said anything?
Yeah.
But the reason I asked if that was maybe symptomatic or causal, because whether I've got something or not, I've kind of always felt that my thought patterns and behaviors seem to be different.
You're weird, but
it's fine.
I like the weird. So
yeah.
I don't mind.
But I know you experience this as well, and all of our boys get to deal with that too. So is there an inherent knowing that you are different, and then you get this fun world that's quite happy to remind you of that because that's the case. It's just that some people and their differences seem to be less conflictive with the patterns that the majority of us seem to play out.
Yeah. So I believe it's definitely causal, and like as you just said, because when you dig down to it, and I've also listened to a few psychiatrists and stuff like that say that that debate whether rejection sensitivity dysphoria is a symptom of ADHD, or it's not, like they say, it's not actually that, it's actually stemmed from trauma. And whether or not it's, left or right, both aspects of it, I believe, is causal. So if you've got a small child who has ADHD, for example, and let's say they're hyper, so they're running around, they've got boundless amounts of energy and all this sort of stuff, and from a very young age, they're getting told by their parents to sit down and shut up. They are telling the child off, and there's obviously always boundaries about when it comes to behavior and all this sort of stuff. But instead of going, oh, hang on a minute, my child is seems to have so much more energy and seems to be so much more destructive than other children. I wonder why that is. Let's see if we can figure it out and put things into place, strategies into place to help and support. So if they're getting, if they're not getting taught to regulate their emotions, as I said, like with the anger and all this sort of stuff. So if they're not getting taught to regulate.
Strategies appropriate to that child as opposed to the textbook.
strategies appropriate to that child, because you as a parent, for example, when you were a child, you were to sit down and shut up, be seen and not be heard, and all of a sudden you've got this really rambunctious child and you're triggered as fuck. And then so again, which is the same thing, because hey, you're probably exactly the same, for example. So there's one layer of you're different, you're weird, you're naughty, you're this, you're that, you're bad, you know, and different. And then that child goes to school and they get the same thing at school. There's another layer. And, you know, that's the confirmation bias, right? Well, my parents said I'm bad and wrong and naughty and this, and I go to school and the teachers tell me off and say I'm bad and wrong and naughty and all this sort of stuff.
And I don't have any friends.
And I don't have any friends and, you know, and all this sort of stuff, because I haven't learned how to regulate my emotions, and I'll, you know, lash out in anger when I don't mean to. And then go into high school, same thing. Go into adulthood, same thing.
Heightened repercussions. The
heightened repercussions of that. So by the time you get to, say, for example, high school, like senior high school, into adulthood, into, you know, early adolescence, into, you know.
Jail's a thing.
Yeah, well, it's either that.
It's an
extreme version. Or you go, well, I've been told my whole life that I'm bad and wrong, and I want to be liked, loved, and accepted, which is, from a child's perspective, that is the one thing that they want, is to be liked, loved, and accepted, right? And I'm not liked, loved, and accepted for who I am. No one actually told me how to, you know, help myself. So I'm going to shut down all of the parts of me that are bad and wrong. Again, hello, shadow. And do everything I possibly can to not be rejected. Because if I'm rejected, again, that just confirms the story that nobody likes me and nobody loves me and nobody accepts me. Therefore, hello, rejection sensitivity. If you've been like if it's been drilled home to you that if you do this, be that, and all this sort of stuff, no one's going to like you, well, no shit. Of course you're going to have rejection sensitivity, because no one has ever told you in your life that, hey, you're wired differently, which means that, you know what, I may need to put you in a sport so we can run the adrenaline out of you. You know,
shame if you don't like it.
Let's find a sport that you like. Or, you know, what's something that, you know, helps you to regulate yourself, and all of this sort of stuff, you know, finding what works for the child, so that when you go to school, you can, you know, sit down, be quiet, learn the things, come home, you know, expend whatever's pent up in you that you need to expend in the way that, you know, you've been taught to, hopefully by your peers, by your, you know, your caregivers, and know that both things are okay. I also believe, and like if we look at, say, like the conditioning and the trauma side of it, a lot of women, and I will say men too, because they do it quite differently. So and I mean by like unhealed, unregulated, unconscious kind of thing. A lot of women, for example, are conditioned to be people pleasers. So they're conditioned to go and be everything for everyone else, and that's how you get like, love, and acceptance, right? And so they do that so they're not rejected. Mm-hmm. So that's where the sensitivity comes in. That's their form of validation. It also, and I know I've said this before, and I know it's like, you know, a bit ouchy, but yeah, it not only is it conditioning, but it's also a form of manipulation, because you're purposely showing people who you're not are in order for them to love you, so you don't have to feel that rejection. And then also it can become an addiction, because that's the only way you can validate who you are, is by that. So they're doing all of those sort of things in order to not be rejected. If they've gone through some massive trauma or some little, like whatever it is, I don't like to put big and little, because everyone's model of the world is different.
I've got things to say about PTSD and CPTSD in a second.
Yeah. Then they're literally inherently, because of, you know, whatever abuse that they had suffered, has told them that they are bad or wrong, and there's shame and all this sort of stuff. So again, they feel like there's something wrong with them, so therefore they do whatever is necessary to try and cover that up, so people don't go, oh my God, you know, and this is kind of where like actual victim blaming comes in. You know, and be like, instead of going, well, that person's a fuckhead, it's like, oh, well, what did you do? And all this sort of stuff. And then on the flip side of that, inherently, you know, men are taught to, you know, push until they get what they want. How is that also not rejection sensitivity? They just go about it in a completely different way. And I'm not...
Go with it in a defiant way rather than a compliant way.
Exactly. But then on the flip side of it, and then like both sides of this coin, both, you know, species, male, female, whatever, are taught that rejection is bad. You know, if you're rejected, you are bad. Rather than being taught that if that person rejects you, that person's just not meant for you. And that is okay. Like, there's this inherent conditioning within the society that you're supposed to be liked by everybody and not by the people that you're meant to be with. Why you've got your thinky face on? I think I just totally ranted then.
A lot of episodes ago, we spoke about the disproving of ADHD being PTSD.
On how
the symptoms were alarmingly similar.
That and bipolar, especially in women.
What if it's both? Because
what is it?
As I understand it,
yeah,
rejection sensitivity on that level, like, why wouldn't it lead to some form of CPTSD?
Yeah, exactly.
At which point, not only do you have the condition itself,
but the byproduct of
byproduct of the condition, which would compel the double downing of all of it, to lead to that situation you just described, where generally women double down by people pleasing, going into compliance state.
Yeah.
And generally that dude doubles down on being defiant and rejecting society out of hand because they rejected him first, or something like that.
Yeah, like that guy that like tries to like put it on. I don't know if you would know, but you know, when that guy tries to, you know, be all slimy in your DMs or whatever else, and you're just like, no, thank you, and then you just get, I wasn't going to fuck you anyway, and I'm like, wow, a rejection to something I never proposed. Woo!
You're ugly and a lesbian anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Or some dumb shit like that.
How is that? Yeah, that like fucking hello rejection sensitivity disorder. Like it.
That's why I sort of brought it back up, because why wouldn't, as much as we're talking about rejection sensitivity, especially in relation to ADHD and probably autism to a point as well, like why wouldn't that be a thing that is either experienced or at least suspected when it comes to other perceivably stigmatized mental health concerns or conditions? Oh, I have leprosy. Well, I understand why people don't want to hang out with you at that point. But if you have depression, it's like, I'm weird and different and I don't think anyone will get it. And you almost isolate and pre-reject yourself, assuming that you haven't tried to talk to someone and have them go, toughen up, smile, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
Or some bullshit like that. So there's that perpetual cycle of whether it's that causal or symptomatic conversation to go on with, they kind of lead you to the same place, which is ultimately, what do you want to do, mate? And being open to what you can do about that or what you want to do about that.
Yeah.
Because compliant or defiant is not healthy.
No, it's not. And I definitely believe...
And that's just the knock-on effects of whatever it is you're dealing with in the first place.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I definitely believe when it comes to any sort of like diagnosis that is like one that can be learnt through, as you said, there needs to be more information about, like, as I said, like, how did we get here? What's, you know, what was the lead up to it? What's your environment like? What's your lifestyle like? What's this like? What's like that like? You know, and like as you said, is this something that you actually want to do something about?
You're talking about a conversation that is prefaced by the willingness of at least two people to have that kind of conversation. And whether that's a doctor, whether that's a parent, whether it's a best friend, that's just the listener, let alone you being the person who's going, I don't want to identify as anxiety anymore. I want to have a different experience.
Yeah.
Who can I talk to about that I trust to not, I don't think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to come up with strategies when you've been coping for so long, thinking that this is the only real way to do it, and then you get to just fucking manage that shit.
Yeah.
And double down on old behaviors, energy goes where attention flows, like extra CPTSD and all this sort of stuff. And again, like, it's a pretty significant step for me to sort of take, but this is one of the methods by which rejection sensitivity becomes so strong. But the ability to have a different conversation, to reframe soundboard, learn through it, so that you go, like, even in just that act of having a simple conversation, maybe even with yourself, with your fucking journal, with some like online videos on YouTube where you're hearing different perspectives to give you an opportunity to go, well, that person seemed like they were in a bad place. Yeah. And they did it.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm not so alone.
Yeah.
As weird as I am I completely irredeemable and alien? And that's you're not broken. Yeah. You don't need fixing. You just haven't learned how to be you in a world that, intentionally or not.
Oh, it's super intentional. Just saying.
I'd argue there's some things that are just dumb by omission as opposed to dumb by malfeasance, malice. Like the school conversation.
I think it's also like,
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Yeah, and
if you're the few, fucking sucked in.
And I think I feel, and mainly maybe because I do have a child with that piece of paper, but I feel especially in like school systems and stuff is that, and like I got so much crap for when I was going to take my eldest through a couple of, diagnostic criteria. They're like, oh, why are you doing that? There's nothing wrong with him and all this sort of stuff. No, there's nothing fucking wrong with him. I said, but he's going into a system that is not set up for him. And the only way to have him learn in a system that aligns with him is if I have this piece of paper that says that he is different. And whether or not, because I
so that everyone knows he's not faking.
Yeah, well.
Fuck me. But yeah.
But you know what I mean? Whether like, and don't worry, I go through that like reflection going, did I do the right thing?
The answer is yes.
And stuff like that. But that's it, because he does learn differently and, and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, for him to get support and, be taught in a way that aligns with him, I needed that piece of paper. And that is just what you just said, because
the approach just isn't taken to treat them as the individual.
Yeah, because what did you just say? The need of many outweighs
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's like you're dealing with how many thousands of kids at a school. Yeah, you've got to come up with the law of averages
somehow
system that works for most kids. Yeah.
So
talking about humans here.
But even still, like even a system that works for all kids, I actually don't believe it actually works for all kids at all. I think it's just
Some kids deal with it better than others.
Do you know the origin of school? I learned this. It's super fascinating.
What you mean the
like how
automated factory workers how do I get them to shut up? How do I get them to toe the line? By pre-programming them in school where they're young enough so that when they are in the factory job to just be good little automatons, and I'll give them a gold watch and it'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. I actually learned that from a teacher, which was super fascinating. She was telling me that, the school had come out because parents that were working in the factory needed somewhere to put their children, daycare, and all that sort of stuff. And then some high-end person in that run the factories, whatever, like went, oh, hang on a minute, if I develop...
Sounds like a Rockefeller conversation or something like that.
If I develop a system that is going to condition these children to be, do, see, how, whatever...
Yeah, generations of workers.
I'm going to have generations of workers. How many robots run a fucking factory now? Like, honestly, there's very, very few fucking factory workers, and the school system has not changed and adapted to... Well, some have changed and adapted.
Usually called Montessori schools.
Yeah, Montessori. I don't know why. I believe that the school that our boys are at, they're pretty onto it. Like, you know,
because we pay enough money for them to
fucking right
pay attention. Anyway, let's not get too cynical about the quality education these kids are getting.
Yeah, right. But the school system has not updated to align with the fact that people really don't work in factories anymore. Like, a lot of them are run by machines and robots and all this sort of stuff. You know, so it's you're in a broken system You know, the irony.
So
that was just little left of centre, but you never.
It's a pretty relevant point as far as I'm concerned. How big a picture do we want to take this?
Well, I am just...
Because as much as we're talking about schools and jobs...
Did we go off topic by any chance?
No, I'm about to take this on a different societal evolutionary biology conversation.
Sweet. Go for gold.
If we have an imperative evolutionary drive to manage the chaos of the universe and the world around us by making each other as predictable as possible.
Yep.
Why wouldn't that manifest in everything? Now, I say that, and superficially it sounds like a negative thing.
Yeah.
How else do you tell people the general lay of the land? Do your best not to fuck up, because exile's a thing. And up until depending on what country you live in, for quite some time, that was enforceable by, you're just not going to be around anymore.
Yeah.
Exile or death.
Yeah.
Get out.
And that's, I think that as well, the rejection sensitivity dysphoria, that in itself comes back to what you just said, because, you know, one of the ingrained wounds that we have carried on for generations and stuff like that is the fear of judgment. And that fear of judgment is due to exile, where, you know, way back when, as you said, like if you didn't do the thing, you'd be kicked out of the tribe. I believe the difference is from that to then is everyone in said tribe had a role and it was suited to the person. Some way, shape or form. Like you've got the hunters, you've got the gatherers.
I get what you mean.
You know, you've got the mothers and the nurturers and all this sort of stuff, and the healers and you know, fucking the medicine woman or medicine man or whatever else, right? Every tribe had certain people that fulfilled certain roles. 9 times out of 10, those roles were, you know, created for the people. I think we've had a discussion, which will be a podcast episode at some point, on how a lot of people, you know, that in today's world have ADHD or autism or anything like that were actually the healers and the medicine people of the tribes.
I think it was like 6 episodes ago.
Yeah.
The necessity of neurodivergency for societal progression.
Yeah.
That those were important people.
Yeah, they were important people because, they could obviously, like highly empathic, highly in tune, sense things, psychic abilities, third eye open. Forward thinking, whatever the case may be, right? The ability to ask questions when things didn't sound right. Yeah, so that was the thing. And then you come into today's world or, a couple of generations ago, for example, and it was if you didn't fit into this little box, you're out of the tribe. So it didn't matter if that little box was never meant for you. It was if you didn't fit into this one, you're fucking gone. And no one's going to like you and all this sort of stuff, which then, is that exile thing.
I think we're talking again about the distinctions between leadership and management or rulership or domination.
Yeah.
Because there will be tribes where the dude at the top just said, "You fucking doing what you're told or there's a stick up your ass."
Yeah.
Sometimes literally. Because impaling was a thing.
Yes.
Not a cool way to go.
No.
Whereas what you're describing is where are your skills orientated towards?
Yeah.
That's, to my mind, leadership.
Yes.
The inherent care and the necessity of dealing with the individual in front of you, whether it's by centuries of malice-orientated conditioning for power consolidation, or whether it's because on a real level, thinking and caring takes effort.
All that.
And by extension, if you've got 350 million people to care and put effort and thought into, no wonder Obama got like iron grey after being in office for 8 years. It's not the point. To take this back to self, the necessity of recognizing that this is who you are. This is who you've been told you are. Acknowledging that those two aren't the same thing and acting accordingly with your own best interests and the people around you's best interests at heart is kind of where we're at. And identifying as a condition that is effectively a limitation, but recognizing that sometimes you need more than just the reluctance to be pigeonholed. Sometimes you do need a little bit of help. Sometimes you do need a little bit of opportunity to sort of feel the support of those around you and needing to find those people who can do that for you.
Yeah. And I think that's it as well. And I feel, I believe, and I know that again, where that sort of failing has happened. So, like one thing, for example, so the system, so the government, removed all holistic practices from private health. So, even if you are registered and all that sort of stuff, you cannot claim private health on things like hypnotherapy, NLP, body work, stuff like that, depending. But then also, I don't know about you, I'm pretty sure you would have too, but I've had multiple people come through my door, and the last-ish effort, because I'm holistic, in the way I do things, and by holistic I mean I'm traditional, that have had psychiatrists or psychologists turn around and tell them that they are broken and there's nothing they can do. And like...
Do you know how many people... Like, I work with a lot of messed up people. I've lost count of how many times they've said, how come they couldn't send me to you in the first place? Because
Right.
you listen better. You've actually helped me.
And that's where I think as well, where the system is set up for you to fail, because you go to a doctor, for example, and let's say, for example, you know, you've got, you know.
Sorry, I just realized this conversation was inevitably going to end up
Here.
Fucking
yes. You go to the doctor and, you know, you get diagnosed with, I don't know, like depression or something, or, you know, CPTSD or PTSD or severe anxiety disorder, like, you know, emotional regulation, what the fuck ever, right? They're like, okay, you need to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Here is your mental health plan, which is like, you know, 10 sessions covered by Medicare. There you go. Here is the person you're going to call. Yeah, so...
Too bad if they're a jaded bellend.
I was just like, how well does that ever fucking work out? Because if you're not going to, if the person's not going to connect, if there's no trust, if there's no, so if you do that a few times over, again, there's that rejection thing coming through again. Like, you know, maybe I am fucking broken. Maybe I can't be fixed. Maybe I'm this or maybe I'm that, because, you know, I've gone to all these people and, you know, they've said this and they've said that, you know, and I know for you as well as I do, if anyone comes through our doors, for example, that wants to work with us for a prolonged period of time, there is a consultation process that happens first, because
without fail.
Yeah, exactly. Because like both parties need to know that this is a good fit. Both parties need to know that, you know, there's trust and rapport and all this sort of stuff.
If they don't know who the fuck I am, why would they trust me to tell me the things that they need to
exactly.
tell me?
So, you know, you've got a massive portion of the population going, well, I have this and I want to do something about it. I want to learn through it. I want to know how to manage myself. I want to know this and I want to know that. And they get sent to fucking some psychiatrist who's, you know, like the principal that shouldn't be a fucking principal anymore. And just goes, well, you're fucked. Have a great day, and here's, you know, pay me $500. And so, but then, yeah, it said like we come through, and I've had so many people that come through our doors and be like, oh, this person said this or this person said that, and I'm broken in this. And I'm like, I've worked with them for 2 hours and they're like, oh my God, it makes sense now. Thank you. And I know you've had the same thing.
I can't think of many people that I haven't heard that come up for.
Yeah.
All of that. So what I said before about this conversation was inevitably going to end up here. Everything that we've set up to maybe 3 minutes ago is the premise of address who you are. Because the system won't.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like the system is literally set up for you to fail. And they will sit there and jump up and down and go, like, the mental health system is so overloaded. Wait lists are months and months and months long. There's myself, there's you, and there's so many people in our back pockets that
We're
work.
about to get much more cynical.
Work in mental health, and you know, there's that. There's also on the other side of it as well, and I don't know if this is the cynical part that you're getting to. There's also the other side of it as well, where people by society have been conditioned to believe that only a psychiatrist or a psychologist can help them. And anyone else that does alternative methods of, you know, trauma work, you know, somatic work, like for myself, like hypnotherapy work, NLP, you know, physiology, exercise, stuff like that. Well, you're not a psychiatrist, so you can't help.
So,
like, do you want to change, or are you happy being broken and having the fact that there's a 6-month waiting list and you're all shitty about the 6-month waiting list, but you're, again, not opening perspective enough to go, well, maybe I'll try something else while I wait. What do I have to lose?
So where I was going with the cynicism was that we're dealing with a medical model that is more invested in illness than wellness.
That.
I say that just casually throwing it out there.
Just putting it in there.
It's
the whole thing. The system is literally set up for you to fail. It wants you to stay sick.
It's not even the fail. It's the perpetuation of business.
Yeah. Well, it wants you. Well, yeah, that's it. It wants you to stay unwell. It wants you to stay sick because then you spend money, time, and energy in spaces that keep you that way, and they fucking know it. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw this thing on Instagram, and it was pretty much saying that someone had actually found a cure for cancer. Like years,
tell you what it is right now.
Yeah, years and years and years and years ago, that person's been cancelled, and like there's been like nothing. They've literally shut the whole thing down.
Cancer, free energy, just yeah. Okay.
Just to take it there.
The reason I said we expand what you said about the way school seems to be built, and expand it to a broader spectrum on what society seems to be sort of built on. This is the conversation that we get to. And this is where I'm going to sit here and tell whoever happens to be listening, this is why you need to take your power back over yourself.
Yeah.
This is why the label needs to be heard as a way to help you with additional information about how you may or may not work. It still is reliant on you to make your own damn decisions about what is best for you.
Yeah.
Because if there is a medical model that, as you can clearly hear, we're not massive fans of,
no.
The necessity of deciding who you are and what you want and sourcing the help that works and makes sense to you to facilitate that is kind of a big deal. We started this episode talking about genuine, or the balance of something you can learn through versus something that is just, look, you're just different, and it's a thing that even pills can't really do much about.
Yeah.
And being able to identify which one is which, but still
Stop pooping
picking
yourself.
and choosing, because I tried to put those two as prooping or choosing or whatever, sort of picking and choosing where your path forward actually sits in regards to the circumstances you're dealing with.
Who do you want to be?
And the shit around you that may or may not be contributing to that in a valuable way. Yeah.
And, well, like as you said, if it's something that you can learn through, I believe most things are something you can learn through. Even if it is something that it just is, you can still learn through things.
It's still incumbent on you to have management plans in place, whether that's medication or a straitjacket or whatever it happens to be.
Grippy socks. No.
Maybe you're that dude who just needs to live in a cave on the mountain.
I don't want to be that dude.
Look, you'll be licking a lot of moss off the walls,
it's just
but fill your boots.
That's like...
Hey,
like
that's prime mushroom growing real estate right there.
Right. But that's that old conversation of, and I see a lot of it coming through, which is it's super cool. And it's like people, wanting to go back, living off the grid, growing their own food, doing this, doing that, all that sort of stuff. That's what I meant about, like, the man in the cave licking moss.
Oh, look, you make your own moss farm. It's fine. But it's also the necessity of looking at why that person has chosen to do that.
Yeah.
Going, I want to take the ultimate power over where my life goes and how I want to sustain that. So we talked about like the threat of exile.
Yeah.
Those people have chosen exile from a certain point of view, but have invested enough time and effort in using their own power over themselves and how they can learn through a situation, whether that's a specific medical condition, a learned condition, or societal patterning at large.
Yeah.
It's still on you and on them to go, I want to live different. And finding
how to do that
in whatever fashion makes fucking sense to you.
Yeah.
It might be in a cave on a mountain. It might be a hippie commune where your deodorant's just rubbing mint in your armpits or something. I don't know. Maybe you make bricks out of your own shit. Like whatever it happens to be,
Yep.
You got to soundboard that shit out to figure out what that looks like and
how to like overcome that.
So if you identify as a cog in the wheel of a medical / educational / governmental system, that's what you become. If you identify as depression, that is what will continue to be true.
Until you can...
regardless of which version it is.
Yeah, until you can disidentify with it.
If I continue to identify as... gets no right swipes on Tinder, you're probably going to take shitty pictures, put it in a shitty bio, because that way you get to feel correct, which is better than having no one swipe right on you because you're just hideous.
Oh.
But you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
how else do you make sense of it? Like, if you're just not that good looking.
Yeah.
On that particular app, based on what I've heard about it, you're not going to get a whole lot of right swipes.
Well, I'm not or you're not.
Anyone. I don't think we're quite bordering on hideous chud, like real estate. But, you know, like, it's not the point. It's not actually about us. It's like whatever version you invest in is kind of who you become.
That's it. And
energy flows where thought goes.
Yeah. And even just a really cool, I guess, endpoint is the meat popsicles piloted by spirit ghosts that we are as human beings. One of the things that we thrive on is challenge and progression and evolution.
Literally built for it.
We're literally built for it.
Cannot overstate that, guys.
And one of the things that one of my master trainers said, you know, that was just like, if you don't give yourself challenges, things to do to grow, evolve, and overcome, the universe will give them to you.
And they'll be internal.
And they will be fucked.
What if that's actually what we thought? So depression and anxiety.
That's
they are effectively what you get when you don't step up to the challenges that you're given.
Which again comes back to, you know, school and the model that school is, and then the model that society is. It's literally not designed. Well, it's designed for you to grow to a certain point.
Or at least in a certain direction.
Or in a certain direction. Once you get there, that's it. And that is all life is. Like, yeah, no wonder why people get depressed. Because there's nothing there for them to grow and evolve to. And they've been conditioned to believe. And then they've taken on that belief that, well, this is all that there is. There's not any more because, you know, that person said so. And, you know, as all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, and then, yeah, it's just like... well, if you don't hear, you know, if you don't listen to the whispers, they become knocks. If you don't listen to the knocks, they become thuds. And if you don't listen to the thuds, you get knocked on your fucking ass.
Yeah. Get your teeth kicked in.
That's it.
By the universe at large.
And yeah, so with that being said, have we gone into tangent land enough and expanded and, you know, deducted and inducted?
You are not your condition.
Yeah.
You are a being that experiences things
and
that get labeled as a condition. You are not your past. You are not your thoughts. You are not a lot of things. You are not the condition. You are someone that experiences anxiety.
Yep.
You are someone that experiences depression. You are someone that experiences the symptoms that are aligned with ADHD. And treating it and yourself accordingly while your podcast partner plays with a little plastic shark because she's getting to the point where concentrating may or may not. Oh, actually, it's a pretty cool fucking shark. I'll give you that.
I was like, what the fuck is it? It's got slit. And it's got a hole. And I'm like, does it go on a pencil?
It goes on a cable charger.
I was close.
Yeah. So you plug in
the
charger, and it's like the shark's biting the tablet or the phone.
Oh, there's so much dopamine in that. I've seen those.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'm just not seeing a shark one. The shark's pretty cool.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
You're pretty happy about that, aren't you?
So, sorry. With that being said, as I got way distracted with my cool shark and two small humans.
It's your shark, is it?
Yeah.
To argue that with JoJo.
The shark. Satisfied?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty.
We didn't go too hard into the cynicism.
No, we didn't. But
all right. I could have gone way harder.
Yeah. But then I think we may even go way harder with our next episode, which is
instinct injury.
Instinct injury.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's going to be a whole big thing.
Oh, that's going to be a thing.
Have we talked about the daemon yet?
No, we haven't. Or if we have, we've kind of just brushed over it.
Ooh, it's going to get a good run in the next one.
Yeah. With that being said, be good.
Be kind.
Be smart.
Be your best you.
No bar fights.
See you guys.
See ya.